Good evening and happy Tuesday. Thank you for tuning in this January 24th, 2017 with the Justice Team Consumer Legal Hour on Intellectual Radio, iHeartRadio with Justina Winfrey and Mr. John Carter. Mr. Carter?
Hello, everyone, and hello, Justina. It's great to be back with you again. And for our program this evening, I thought we will cover a topic since it's upon us right now, and we have a new administration that has taken control of the White House. The Republicans are in control now. They're going to be in control for quite some time. It is important to understand how you can leverage your money. And so tonight we're going to talk about taxes and the tax system and some of the do's, the don'ts, some of the things you probably should know about, and the things you should be concerned about or not be so concerned about. And so with that, we're going to talk about taxes on this Tuesday. Many of you have already started receiving your W-2s or your 1099s. That's great if you have. If you haven't, your employer should be getting them out to you fairly soon. They should be out by January 31st, but we know some employers are slow. They don't get them out until the first or second week of February. But in any case, let's start out talking about the Internal Revenue Service, because that is one of the big bureaucracies in America that folks are afraid of. The big bad IRS. And what you need to know, and I'm going to give you a lot of insider information today, so to speak. It's really not insider information, but it's just things that some folks don't really know. The Internal Revenue Service, first of all, is not one large organization, as most taxpayers think. The Internal Revenue Service is actually 4 very distinct departments that make up one organization. So what that means is that the Internal Revenue agents have no more rights or access to your federally filed tax return than your neighbor does. And that's why during the election, there was so much rub about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and all these people providing information on their tax return. Now, let's think about it. They have to go to the taxpayer in order to get the taxpayer to volunteer information about the tax return. Well, these people are running for federal office, so can't the Justice Department or someone from the Internal Revenue Service or whatever go in and simply through a FOIA or whatever request the information about the tax return? The answer is no. Your tax information is strictly confidential, and without your written express consent to allow someone to view or review your tax information, they can't have it, including. So let me explain how that works.
Including, John, we didn't hear that last part. Including, you cut out for a minute.
Yeah, and that also includes the Internal Revenue Service.
Okay.
So a field agent or an auditor of the Internal Revenue Service, like say, for example, if you get a letter from the Internal Revenue Service, and remember, the Internal Revenue Service will always send you a letter about a tax debt, an obligation, or problem. The Internal Revenue Service does not call you. So if you get a phone call about a tax debt or an issue or money you owe, and the person tells you they're from the IRS, that's a scam. Don't even talk to them. Just hang up the phone, because you're not obligated to talk to a scammer. The IRS does not call people. You always have to initiate the phone call to the Internal Revenue Service first. So the first indication that it's a scam is that if someone calls you about a debt that you need to pay, and then they ask you to go get a green dot card and keep you on the phone while you drive to get the green dot card, which in most states is illegal to drive while you're on the phone anyway, to put the money on a green dot card, and then don't cash it or don't initiate it, just give them the number once the money is on the card. That's a scam. And for most people that have common sense will probably figure out that that's a scam. But anyway, let's go back to this, deal about the Internal Revenue Service. When you get a letter from an audit, for example, notice that in the letter, the Internal Revenue agent will usually ask you to bring certain information to your tax audit. One of the things at the top of the list is that the IRS will ask you to bring a copy of your tax return. Now, let's think about this for a moment. If you file the tax return, don't they already have a copy of it? You would think that they do. But the fact is that the Internal Revenue Service field agent has no more right to your tax return than your neighbor does. The only way they can get a copy of that return is, number one, you provide it to them, or number two, you give them the express consent to get one, or if you don't do that, they have to file a request to another department in the IRS and explain to them that the reason that they're requesting the information is that they want to do a tax audit on you. There's a likelihood that the tax information that you filed was incorrect, or it needs some amending or whatever, and they have to justify getting your tax information, which takes approximately 12 weeks. So it's easier and faster for the Internal Revenue agent to do an audit if you bring them everything that they're asking for to the actual audit. But under the law, you do not have to provide the Internal Revenue Service with any tax information that you actually file. So when they ask you to bring a copy of your tax return with you to an audit, if you actually file the return that they're doing the audit on, you do not have to bring it to the audit with you, unless you just want to be a nice guy and do it. It makes that auditor's job a lot easier because you just gave them everything that they need to, disallow your exemptions, or sometimes even find more money for you. Just depends on what the situation is. So just think about that and keep that in mind, that when you're dealing with these folks, while you think that they are the big bad wolf, they're not the big bad wolf, although they are given a tremendous amount of power to wreak havoc on your financial life, but they're not the big bad wolf because these folks actually work for you, and they're nothing more than tax collectors for the federal government. And when you understand that, they're not as intimidating and not as scary as they sound, because as tax collectors for the government, you still have a lot of remedies against things that they may do that are improper. And so you need to know what the rules are and need to know what the law is. So if you feel like if you've been violated by one of these people that are just common people doing a job just like anyone else, you can file your complaint and you can take the appropriate remedies against them so you're treated right, fairly, and above board as a taxpayer. That's the bottom line. So with that knowledge, let's move on to a few topics here. Let's look at one of the big issues or sensitive issues for most taxpayers is the earned income credit. Let's look at this wicked earned income credit. Now, we know that if you have at least 2 children, you can get maximum earned income credit, also depending on what your income is, where you fall in income, that you get money for having those children under the earned income credit. Unfortunately, there are a lot of folks that cheat with the earned income credit. You have to know that over the last few years, this year especially, and next year even more so, the Internal Revenue Service is really cracking down on people that abuse the earned income credit. If you are caught abusing or cheating the earned income credit provision, you will not be allowed to take the earned income credit for 3 years. And then when you do apply or try to take the earned income credit again, after that period of time, there's a form that you will have to file with the Internal Revenue Service asking permission to take the credit. Because here's some of the things that you need to know. The reason that the earned income credit now is so hard to cheat on. Now, and what I mean about this, that a lot of you that go to these tax places where all these, foreign folks are in there doing, selling you the names of other children and giving you the names of dead children and all of this, that's uncouth, is uncool, it's illegal, it's unethical, it's everything else. But folks still do it. Or if Aunt Mimi has 9 kids and she can only get the earned income credit for 2 of them, and so she's going to let, the Uncle Jed and Granny Mae and Jeffro and everybody else claim the rest of her kids who don't live in their household and, they haven't provided more than 50% of their support for the year. They'll claim those kids so they can get the earned income credit. Those are the kind of folks that I'm referring to here. Okay, so let's get that straight. But anyway, those folks are being cracked down on because what has taken place over the last couple of years is that the Social Security Administration has shared a database now for several years with the Internal Revenue Service. So how they were catching people is that if the Social Security number of the child didn't match exactly the way that it was on the card, the name and the number, exactly the way that it was on the Social Security card, it will flag the Internal Revenue Service. And, that may or may not trigger an audit. But then what happened in a few years after that is that the public school system, by federal mandate, by Congress, started sharing their database as well with the Internal Revenue Service. So now you have the Internal Revenue Service, the public school system, and the Social Security Administration all share the same common database. So how that makes it easier to catch a person that's cheating with the earned income credit is because wherever the child lives, wherever the school has as an address for the child, when the person files a tax return, if the address of the person who files a tax return does not match the address of the child when it pops up in the system because you used their name, their birth date, and Social Security number, that's going to be an audit flag. And you are going to be audited because now you're going to have to prove to the Internal Revenue Service that that child lived in your home for 12 months out of the year, if you're going to take that earned income credit, or at least more than 6 months out of the year. Because, there's some exceptions for, parents who are divorced and they share the kids and they share the exemption credits and whatnot from odd years, even years, and I'm not even going to get into all of that. But that's another interesting area, which I'm going to touch on here in a minute. But for those folks that are using children that are not theirs, one of the ways you get caught is that the address that you're using is not the same address that the school is using for the child. And that makes sense because the child lives with his mother or his dad or their grandma, whoever they live with during the school year. And whatever address that child has on file at the school better match the address that you're filing as a taxpayer saying that child lived there all year. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. Now, if there are parents that are sharing the personal exemption credit or the child tax credit for a child because they divorced, the child lives with mom, sometimes on weekends, the child lives with dad on alternate weekends, they're both contributing to the support of the child. How this magic trick works is that the Internal Revenue Service will not get involved in a custody battle, a custody suit, or any type of civil litigation when it comes to who has the right to claim a child when or where. Now, your divorce decree or property settlement agreement can address those issues, but as far as the IRS rules go, is that whoever files first with that child, if both those parents have equal access to the child because they have a shared custody agreement, whoever files first, whether it was in the appropriate year or not, that's who's going to get the money for that child from the Internal Revenue Service. And then if you want to reclaim that money, I mean, you can file a complaint, and the IRS will, document it that it happened and everything. But the only way you're going to get that money back is that you're going to have to go to civil court, and you're going to have to sue that person based on the property settlement agreement or the child custody agreement that they filed on that child in the wrong year. But if you're going to try to pull the Internal Revenue Service into that quagmire of a mess, they're not going to go for it. And they'll tell you, we're sorry that that happened to you. Fill out this form. We'll ask them about it. But if we find out and they provide evidence that they have just as much right or claim on a joint custody agreement for their child, they're not going to get involved in that civil litigation. The IRS is a federal agency. They're not a state agency. And custody agreements are under state law. They vary by state to state. So the federal government is not going to get involved in a custody action or custody dispute when it comes to a tax refund. They're not going to do it.
So let me ask you this, John. A lot of people feel the IRS flat out, they're just an illegal entity, and the things that they do are illegal. Their tactics are illegal. What do you say to those people? And again, we'd like to just announce that we're not giving legal advice. This is information that you can use at your own discretion. But Mr. Carter, what would you say to people that feel the IRS are just illegal? How do they begin to dispute?
Well, first of all, people who say that are just off their rocker anyway, and they're really ignorant of the law, because the tax code is actually couched in the federal codes and the federal regulations. Now, the Congress, under the Constitution of the United States, is given the authority and the job to tax and spend. So, let's go back to some of the constitutional roots of all this. Most people look at the president, like, for example, Donald Trump has come up and say, I'm going to cut taxes and I'm going to do this and I'm going to lower this and I'm going to get rid of the IRS. He's an idiot. The president of the United States has no authority under the United States Constitution to do anything about taxes. He does not have the authority, period. The only taxing authority under the Constitution in this country is by the United States Congress. Now, the president can recommend things to the Congress that he would like to see happen, and he does have some white letter authority that he can, write some things out. But the only way it becomes law is that it has to go through Congress. Only the Congress of the United States has the authority to tax and spend, not the president. So every time that there's a campaign promise on a campaign trail from a president that he's going to do anything about taxes, that's a big fat lie. He doesn't have the authority. He never has had the authority ever since the Constitution was framed. It's a lie. The politicians lie. So, that's first of all. So Congress came up with the Code of Federal Regulations. So under the Code of Federal Regulations, there are provisions that the Congress of the United States has set into law that says that we are going to now have this taxing structure. It started out by states, but in 1948, because of all of the things that were going on with the, Great Depression had happened and the recessions had happened, the Americans started getting older. For every one American that was unemployed or underemployed, there were 40 working Americans. So in 1948, they came up with the income tax system. What these people mean is that prior to 1948, there was no income tax system the way that we have it right now. When Roosevelt established the income tax system, his administration only intended it for it to be temporary, just to get people out of soup lines and soup kitchens. Remember, we had gone through 2 world wars. After the wars were over, the economy got real bad. So they set up this income tax system that people were taxed on their income. That income tax was as high as 70%. It started at like 25 to 30. I went all the way up to 70%. Over the years, that has regressed, and we've gone to this progressive tax structure where it starts out at 10%, goes to 15%, 25%, 28%, up to 39% of a person's income. Yes, if you make over $100,000 in this country, your tax rate is at 39% of whatever you earn. It should be paid in taxes. That's the tax code. Now, when the IRS was established to collect these taxes, they also came up with Treasury regulations. Now, Treasury regulations are regulations that are made up by, the Treasury Department. They're made up by the IRS. Well, a lot of people get it confused is that they say, well, I don't have to abide by Treasury of regulations and the IRS rules because those are really not the functions of the Congress. They're making these rules themselves. Okay, I can understand the argument. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I can understand the argument. But under the code of federal regulations, however, that for the laws that the Congress passed, they have made provisions that the Congress of the United States can tax and spend. And since 1948, they have made several rules that have given the Internal Revenue Service a lot of teeth. Folks are correct that it didn't used to be that way, but the fact is it is that way right now. It used to be a time in this country that if you never filed a tax return, you never agreed to file a tax return, you never filed a tax return, you didn't have to, and nobody would be the wiser. But where you get caught into the tax trap of having to file a return is that once you file your very first tax return, you're obligated from that point on to always file one. Always. So at that point, you just have to learn the rules. So people get upset because the IRS comes after them for tax debts. Well, can the IRS continually come after you for a tax debt that you owe? The answer is no. There is a statute of limitations that the IRS can come after you for money that's owed on a tax return for a tax return that you actually filed. So let's say that you filed a tax return in 2000 and the IRS sent you a tax bill for that tax return that you filed in 2000. Well, how long do they have to collect that tax debt? They have 6 years. The IRS can come after you and garnish you and put liens on you and all of that for a period of 6 years. After that, it used to be 10 years, but the Congress changed it. Now it's 6 years. After 6 years, can they come after you anymore? No, they're not supposed to. But this is usually what happens. Just like the typical collection agency, you see this all the time. What will happen, you'll usually get a nice letter from the IRS that says, hey, we see you're having problems. That's so sad. We want to help you. We don't want you to be having problems, so we're willing to work out an installment agreement with you and let you pay this tax obligation that you've owed since 2000 in installments. And let's say it's 2005, the last quarter of 2005, or even let's say that it's the second quarter of 2006. That means that it's really, really close to time that the statute of limitations have run. They can't try to collect on that tax debt anymore. So what do? They offer you an installment agreement. And what do you think most people do? Because they make it sound so lucrative. You only have to pay us $50 a month, and we'll leave you alone as long as you pay us the $50 a month on this tax debt. Never mind that it's got a gazillion dollars worth of interest by then and penalties. But hey, we'll even waive some of the penalties, but not the interest if you will enter into this installment agreement. Do you think most people go for it? After all, it's the big bad IRS calling, giving you a carrot to get you to cooperate to pay a tax debt that you owe. So do you think most people do it? Yes, they do. But what happens when you enter into that installment agreement? In 6 months, the debt would have fallen off and you wouldn't have ever owed it or wouldn't have ever had to pay them anyway. But because you entered into an installment agreement with the Internal Revenue Service, you've now consented that the Internal Revenue Service can attempt to collect that debt for 40 years. So an installment agreement that a person signs with an Internal Revenue Service is an agreement that they can continue to come after you for that tax debt and any tax debt that's owed on top of that for a subsequent tax year for 40 years. So what you've done is, in effect, you've effectively waived the statute of limitations for them to collect that tax debt. And a lot of folks don't know that. Now, let's touch on another issue for people that don't think that they want to pay the IRS or can't pay the IRS.
So we have someone chiming in online. So you don't have.
Sure.
So they're asking. So you don't have to pay tax that's over 6 years old then.
No.
Unless you sign the installment agreement
unless you made an installment agreement, unless you entered into an offer in compromise, any of those agreements waives the statute of limitations, and then you give them 40 years to collect that debt. And that cannot be undone. The only thing that can undo it is that you die. That's it.
Wow.
That's it. So you have to read the fine print. I mean, you got to learn these rules. Now, what else though can really can curb it, stop it, set it off? Well, you know, there's two types of insolvency in this country. There's insolvency under the bankruptcy code, which means like under Chapter 7, where I don't have any money and I got more debts than income, therefore I'm insolvent. And so you can go to a bankruptcy court, and a bankruptcy trustee and a judge will kind of look over your assets. And if you got more debt than income, they'll sell off whatever assets you got to pay off creditors, which leaves you with basically nothing. But the Chapter 7 gives you the opportunity to start all over again, or at least so they say. Now, under the Treasury regulations, they also have insolvency rules. But insolvency under Treasury regulations is different than insolvency under the bankruptcy code. Now, here's where the IRS rules come in, where they can work in your favor. Under the Treasury regulations, if the money that you're bringing in every month for rent, you know, utilities, for medications, for, you know, child care and everything else, equals or exceeds the amount of your income, then you're insolvent. Now, you can still have things. You can still have a car, you can still have a house, you still keep all your stuff. But you can fill out a form to the Internal Revenue Service and ask them to deem the debt as uncollectible. So the IRS can actually deem a tax debt as an uncollectible debt because you're insolvent. And so what will happen is the Internal Revenue Service will have you to fill out this form. It's, you know, it's a budget form. It's usually a form 433A, which you can get offline, or a form 433B if you're a small business owner. You'll fill that out and you send it to the Internal Revenue Service, and you send them a cover letter with it and ask them that you want to be considered for insolvency and you want your tax debt deemed as uncollectible. So if the IRS looks at that, and under the law, it's not up to them, you know, they don't have a whole lot of discretion in it. If they see that after you pay all your monthly bills, there isn't enough money to actually reasonably pay a tax obligation, you don't have to pay them. And they will deem your debt as uncollectible. Now, to keep it that way, every year you have to resubmit, because every time you file a new tax form, because you also have to keep current on all your tax filings, to keep that going, you have to every year file for uncollectability again. But what will happen is that if you couldn't pay that tax year and you're still in the same financial situation and it hasn't changed very much, every year subsequent to that, they will, and if you file a new form, they will automatically roll any money that you owe in that new tax year into uncollectability as well. Now, does that have a statute of limitations? Yes, it does. Because after 10 years go by, and in some cases 6 years, after 10 years go by, if the IRS still hasn't been able to collect any of that money from year to year to year that you've been deemed in an uncollectible status, those tax debts go away and you never have to pay them. So each year another one drops off. But what they're hoping, because, you know, people are progressive in their lives, you know, no one, you know, really wants to stay in the same situation. Theoretically, we know that's not true, because there's a lot of people that's been on welfare forever, for generations, and not necessarily, I'm not knocking that, but I'm just saying that's just not a good quality of life to have. But they hope that your life will improve and you will start making money, that they can eventually collect the money, when the truth is, some folks, it just doesn't happen, because a breadwinner could have had a stroke, they could have died, they could have lost the business, people could have gone through a very bad divorce. There's all kinds of reasons that people get into the financial dire straits that they're in, you know. And the bottom line, that if you don't have it, you don't have it. And as the old saying goes, you can't get blood out of a turnip. No one understands that better than the Internal Revenue Service. So you don't have to be afraid of them. I mean, if you don't have the money to pay these tax debts that they have you paying, and you got this huge tax bill, and you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and you can't even pay rent or eat or buy food or put gas in your car because the IRS filed this lien and they're garnishing everything or they're levying everything that you have. All you have to do is file a 911 form, which you can get from the IRS website. File a 911 form with the Taxpayer Advocate's Office and tell them that you want to abate this levy and these liens, and that you just cannot afford to pay the tax debt. And if that's true, just simply take your budget, look at what you're bringing in, and if you honestly have more liability and debt than you do income, you can have them to write that off as an uncollectible debt. And they have to do it. It's the law, because the law works both ways. It doesn't just work for the IRS. It also works against them as well. So for those folks that say, well, I'm not going to comply with the tax law, well, you're going to go to jail. Ask Wesley Snipes. Now, I'm sure that brother had enough money to pay any kind of lawyer, any kind of tax lawyer that he wanted to. But all the money in the world that he had when they came after him, under the law, just like they went after Al Capone, they get him for tax evasion. Al Capone, as much as havoc as he wreaked there in Chicago, they didn't get him for murder. They didn't get him for mayhem. They didn't get him for extortion. You know what they got Al Capone for? Tax evasion. Because they couldn't get him on anything else.
Okay, we
Any
have
other questions so far?
Yes, we have an online question. What if you did not file for the past 6 years? How would this person begin to redeem themselves with the IRS?
Okay, if they haven't filed for 6 years, that is horribly bad, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because under the Treasury regulations and under the tax code, for a tax return that has not been filed has no statute of limitations. So if the person doesn't file a tax return, the IRS can come after them for those taxes, no matter what year they were in, no matter how long they were owed for. There is no statute of limitations. It is vitally important that they file as soon as possible, because the statute of limitations starts to run for collections on the day that the return is filed. So if they haven't filed a return for 6 years, they need to file it as soon as possible. Now, here's something else that you need to know. If you file a return and it's been 6 years, you can only go back 3 years for a refund. So if you went back and found out, oh man, I should have filed this a long time ago because I thought I was going to owe, and I actually don't owe, the IRS actually owes me money. Guess what? The IRS gets to keep your money. They get to keep your money because they only have to pay you for 3 years of back taxes. Now that doesn't make sense, because if they come after you and if they do it the right way, they can go back for years and have you to pay with penalties and interest and try to collect from you for a long time. As I said, generally now the statute of limitations is 6 years, but with some tax debt, depending on what it is, they can come after you for as long as 10 years. But after 10 years, it's absolutely over. If they haven't collected it by then, it usually goes away. But keep in mind, when your statute of limitations is getting close, because the Internal Revenue Service is always going to try to work something out with you that you will pay the money. They're always going to try to work out something to get you to pay.
Okay.
Any other questions out there? If not, I'll move on to the next thing.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Okay, so we had talked about the earned income credit. We also need to talk about, just for a minute, the child tax credit. Well, you know what? Prior to doing that, let me go back and talk about one other thing as far as filing statuses. Now, under the law, you do not have to file a tax return if the amount of money you made does not exceed your standard deduction and personal exemption. So your standard deduction depends on your filing status, whether you're married, filing joint, head of household, or whether you file single. So for example, like a single person, the standard deduction is $6,300. The personal exemption credit is $4,250. So it's $4,250. So you add that together. And so it comes out to be somewhere around like $10,500. So if you made less than $10,500, you do not have to file a tax return. Okay, but if you don't file a tax return and you lived in the house with someone who provided more than 50% of your support, even if you were not related to them, the IRS deems you as a member of the household, because a lot of people think that they can only file on like their children or their spouse or their mother, father, sister, brother, aunt, niece, or uncle, or something like that if they were in your household. But if there's an unrelated member, if a person is not related to you by blood at all, you can still claim them as a dependent, even if they are an adult, as long as they lived in your house the entire 12 months and no one else could claim them as a dependent, and they did not make enough money that they were required under the law to file their tax return. Now, that's if you are a W-2 wage earner. If you make under that personal exemption credit and the earned income and the status filing, that you don't have to file a return. If you are self-employed, however, and you earn over $400 from your self-employment, you must file a tax return. You must file one. Now, it's confusing to people because usually if you're an independent contractor and you get 1099 income, we know that an employer doesn't have to give you, or your contractor doesn't have to give you a 1099 if it's under $600, or any income under $600 doesn't have to be reported on a 1099. That doesn't mean that the $600 doesn't have to be reported, because remember, a tax form also has a line 7 for other income. So if you are self-employed and you earn $400 or more, it doesn't matter what your filing status is. It doesn't matter what your personal exemption credit is. You must file a tax return if you are self-employed and earn more than $400 for that year, which a lot of folks don't know that either.
So it's more than $400 for the year.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you're self-employed and earn more than $400, you must file a tax return.
Okay. So we have a question regarding tax returns and death benefits.
Okay. Well, let me just say this. Death benefits are not taxable. As a matter of fact, no type of insurance payment or benefit is taxable. So I see this a lot where someone will die and they will leave someone $100,000 insurance policy because they're a beneficiary. You would be surprised at the wild, wacky, weird things that people do to avoid paying taxes on that $100,000, because they don't realize types of things that you can put away in insurance products. Make your income attached like a disability payment and whatnot to them. That's some of the best things that you can do, because when you go and get that money and go pull that money out, or those benefits get paid out, they're non-taxable events.
This is excellent information. I'm sure many people don't know that.
No, they don't. And for certain types of lawsuits that you get into, certain people that win lawsuits, for example, if a person has sustained a personal injury in an accident, or if a person sued for discrimination and got an award, there's certain things that, and this really depends on what the lawsuit was about, but there's certain awards and lawsuits that are taxable events. There's certain ones that are not. Punitive damages are always taxable. Now, if you were injured, though, you've already been injured, and that money is to compensate you for your injury or to make you whole again. There's certain events out of civil cases that are 100% non-taxable. The IRS cannot take money from you. Neither can the state. But you have to get a good tax professional, and it doesn't have to be a tax attorney or CPA. There's some good tax preparers out there that know this information, but you just have to find the right one. Then let me tell you this: if you go to a tax preparer and they're already telling you some unscrupulous stuff to do, they're using other people's children, and they're claiming exemptions and deductions on your pets and FIDO and all that stuff. No, don't get your stuff and go somewhere else, because they're going to get you in a lot of trouble. Now, that being said, let's talk about one thing that is a benefit if you have a pet. For people who are disabled and they have service animals, whether it's a dog or nowadays, people have ferrets and everything else as service animals because they have, PTSD and all of that. So it's not necessarily a dog that we use as service animals anymore, under the ADA. And what I love about the ADA is that if you do have a service animal, that's to keep you calm, to keep down anxieties and whatnot. People can't even ask you what your disability is or really question you about the service animal. Because if you tell them, hey, this is a service animal, they just have to take you for your word. And usually there's some type of collar or something, or some type of cover that they'll put on the dog to express, or animal to show that it's a service animal. But even if you don't, you have it with you, and you tell the restaurant owner, whoever is a service animal, they just have to take it to word, because if they start questioning you about it, there's a violation of federal law. They can be sued, and they'll have to pay a whole lot of money. But if you have a guard dog that guards your inventory, and you'll see guard dogs usually in places like an automobile impound lot or a junkyard. Have you ever heard the term junkyard dog? People use dogs to guard junkyards, but some folks will use guard dogs for their house. They work out of their home, they keep some collectible items or whatever they have in their inventory in their house, they have expensive things in their house, so they use a guard dog to do that. Guard dogs are deemed as Rottweilers, pit bulls, Labradors, any German Shepherds, a Doberman Pinscher, anything that creates fear in people as a guard dog, that is deductible under the tax code. So if you use a guard dog to guard your inventory, watch your house, guard your business, the vet bills for the care of that animal, the expenses relating to the services of that animal are all deductible. Now, the animal itself is not deductible, so you can't claim it as like you would a child on a tax return, or you can't take exemptions and credits for it. But the expenses related to that animal are. The same way if you use the animal as a service animal, which you can have like a Dachshund or some of these rat terriers, or what are some of those little Taco Bell dogs that people have, those little purse dogs. Now, if you have that dog and it was assigned to you as a service animal, the purchase, the care, the maintenance of that animal is all tax deductible. So folks can use that too. There are a lot of folks out there that are using service animals like that now, or they have a business where they truly use a guard dog. And if you use your dog for that, that becomes deductible. But if you have a dog as a pet and your children play with it, that is not deductible. That's another tidbit to know.
Yes.
Okay, let me look at my little stack of stuff right here. Okay, let's go back to the child tax credit. So a child tax credit is $1,000. So once you've taken the maximum earned income credit and you've taken your standard deductions and you're taking your personal exemption credit, for the additional children in your house, because a lot of tax preparer will say, well, we know you got 5 kids, but you really only get credit for 2 of them. So the other 3, we don't have to list them on the tax return. They're crazy. If you list those kids on your tax return, it's an additional $1,000 credit for each one of them. That's why baby NIM always try to get you to use those additional kids for them, because not only will they get a child tax credit, but if they don't have enough of them, they'll get the earned income credit for that child as well. Illegally, albeit, but some folks will still try it. But I'm telling you, for those of you that have not filed a tax return yet, I'm sure you've heard on the news by now that tax returns are coming a little slower this year. For those of you that use H&R Block and Jackson Hewitt and Liberty Tax and all these other fine tax retailers out there to get your money really fast, you want a rapid refund and you pay these ridiculous prices to get a rapid refund. Guess what? If you electronically file your taxes, your money will be to you in 3 to 7 days. Anyway, usually 3 to 5 days. Now the IRS tells tax preparers that are EROs to tell tax clients that it'll take up to 14 days to get their refund. But under the current system, the way that it's designed now, it never takes 14 days to get a refund unless something's wrong in the return and it gets flagged. Now this year, it'll take a little longer, a couple of days longer, because they are really scrutinizing tax returns for people that are earned income cheap. But if you don't qualify for the earned income credit because you're phased out, you'll usually get your return within a couple of days anyway, if you just simply file the return and you can save that $300 or $250 or whatever that ridiculous amount is that you're paying to get a rapid refund that day. Don't do it, because you're just giving away money. You waited all this time to get that return. What's another 3 days to get it? So that's just not a wise use of your money. I've been telling people, instead of buying things that depreciate like cars and clothes, and that people take their tax return and do all kinds of wild things with them, and it's your money. You can do whatever you want with it, but it's better to invest it in a good insurance product that's going to give you a large dividend, or you for your family. Think about your children. You're leaving that legacy behind. If something were to happen to you, invest in their future. Get an education fund for them. Let it grow. Do you know that if you invest $2,500 in a child's life, you have a 5-year-old and you put $2,500 into a fund, an insurance fund that will pay 8% for that child a year. Every 9 years, that money is going to double. Every 9 years, it's going to double. So by the time the child is ready to go to college, on a $2,500 investment, they will have over $300,000 in the bank on just one $2,500 investment. If they leave the money there when they're 62, they'll have $1.6 million on a principal called compound interest. That's what the banks use. So did you know that you can invest into your child's life, make a $2,500 investment, and they can leave that money into that fund until that child is 62 and have $1.6 million when they retire and never have to contribute another dime to that fund? We know how to set that up for you. I know how to set that up for you. And listen, for people that start saving when they're 24, 25 years old, and here's what I always tell people that's out there in the club Are you banging and balling and all that with the $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 tax return? At the end of the month, that money is gone. You balled it out. So your baller status has been revoked. You're not a baller anymore. But a true baller will take that $5,000 and invest it and build their credit and compound interest. And how, there's a principle, there's a method that I can show you, and I'll teach you for free. I won't charge you a dime to do it. Is that I'll show you how you can take a $5,000 tax return investment, and you keep your money. You don't give it to anybody. I'm going to show you the accounts to set it up with. I'm going to show you the banks to go to, and in 21 months, you will take that $5,000 and build it to a $500,000 line of credit. So your $5,000 now, if you have the discipline not to spend it, and you can let it work for you in the system for 21 months, you'll have $500,000 at your disposal, real cash money that you can use. So then if you want to invest in a business, buy a franchise, buy real estate to invest in or whatever, you can do that. Just don't go to Disneyland. Just don't go buy a new car. We've been taught to drive our money, to wear our money, to flash our money, but we haven't been taught how to invest our money. And that's what this program is all about. What I want to do is to tell you that you don't have to be afraid of the IRS, but it's your money. You can take your money and be financially successful and financially stable by a small amount. If you start early, that small amount can grow into a big savings. But the longer you wait, the more money it's going to take for you to catch up. Now, if you were, started saving money in certain funds, and if you call me, text me, email me, or whatever, I'll tell you what those funds are. If you start early, like when you're 20, a person who starts saving all of their paycheck every week at 45 will never catch up with you for the amount of money that you'll have by the time that you're 62. They'll never catch up with you because of compound interest and the way compound interest works. I mean, it's a phenomenal, wonderful thing of how money works and how taxes work when you know the system and you know how to use it. The trick is to learn the rules. And I stand by my challenge. Anybody out there who's listening, who's willing to take a $5,000 investment and build the best credit in the world, bank credit, I'll show you how. I don't care how jacked up your credit is. If you have bankruptcy, repossessions, charge-offs, if you have all that stuff, I'll show you how you can get rid of that in about 12 to 18 months. And in 21 months, have a $500,000 line of credit with a $5,000 investment, and you keep your money yourself. You're not giving it to anybody. You're not putting it in another person's hands for them to risk it, lose it. You don't know what's happening to it. You follow the method. So what's the risk? It's zero, because if you decide not to do it, or if you do decide to go to Disney, you can just go take your money out. Now, what I will share with you is this. The danger of this with a lot of people who are undisciplined, though, and I know we're almost out of time, is that within the first month of doing this program that I can show you, your $5,000 is going to grow to $20,000 in the first 30 days. You're going to have $20,000. And the temptation is to go spend it. And a lot of people do, and the program never works for them. Because if you spend even $1 of this money before that 21-month period expires, it won't work.
So let's do this. We're wrapping up right now. This has been a very, very informative show. Thank you so much, Mr. John Carter, by way of San Diego. But we want to put out a challenge. Let's pose a public challenge to the community. Take your income tax check and invest it in yourself. And within 21 months, look forward to having a $500,000, at least $500,000 in a line in credit.
That is correct. And the bank will give you a checkbook where you can just write yourself. You'll never have to go borrow, beg money again. You'll never have to ask the bank for money again. They're going to give you a checkbook. And as long as you stay within that $500,000, you can write a check for whatever you need.
Let's put that challenge out there, everyone. The $5,000 challenge. Turn that $5,000 investment into $500,000. God bless. Have a great evening. Happy Tuesday. Thank you. Intellectual Radio, iHeartRadio, Consumer Legal Hour. Mr. Carter.